A young boy with brown hair and a blue tie gets his collar pulled by another boy. The other boy with blue hair taunts him, calling him Owen from the failing House Pepper. The blue-haired boy mocks Owen, saying his parents have no magic talent, and offers to give him a special lesson, a small flame appearing in his hand. Owen stutters, trying to defend his parents, saying they are just magic-hating. Owen suddenly declares, with a burst of fire magic from his hand, that he will become a top-grade magician. The blue-haired boy and another boy look on in shock, while a blonde girl smiles at Owen's display. Owen stands confidently, a large fireball hovering above his hand. 2 years prior, at the Pepper residence in Region Pepper, an 8-year-old, very chubby Owen demands cake from a worried maid because he is hungry and the food isn't ready yet. The maid stutters and Owen kicks her, yelling at her to hurry up and asking if she wants to get fired. Suddenly, Owen trips. He falls face first into a door. The maids gasp in shock. As he lies on the floor, memories from his past life flash before his eyes. The maids rush to his side, worried about his head. Owen remembers his past life as a salaryman named Sasaki Yuyuta. He realizes he has reincarnated as a fat, awful brat who behaved outrageously. Overwhelmed with embarrassment, he performs a doja, apologizing profusely to the confused maids, wishing he could hide in a hole. Later at the dining table, Owen observes his parents, the feudal Lord Black Pepper and his wife Aisha Pepper, eating gluttonously. He reflects on his reincarnation as the son of a vicious feudal lord. Black Pepper declares that the people exist to be extorted to feed the aristocracy, and Aisha agrees. Owen thinks about his parents' elitism and how they look down on commoners. This elitism makes them hated by the people. He realizes that being raised by such parents turned him into a pig. Looking at the feast before him, he mentally apologizes to the people of the territory for his trashy parents. Aisha asks Owen what's wrong and why he isn't eating. Owen replies that he can't muster his appetite. Black Pepper immediately fires the head chef. Owen panics and begs his father not to discharge the chef. He explains that the food is fine, it's just his stomach. He notes the food is high in calories, greasy, and lacks vegetables. He thinks to himself that it's no wonder his father is hated, though he acknowledges he was about to do the same thing earlier. Owen thinks he managed to protect the chef for now, but needs to be mindful of his remarks. Owen asks the chef to reduce his portions and make them healthier because he wants to lose weight. The chef agrees. Later, Owen decides to start exercising. He begins by running outside. Owen collapses on the ground, exhausted, feeling like he's going to die. A butler named Sebas approaches and offers him a towel. Sebas stands over the exhausted Owen. Owen thanks him, realizing his body is too heavy and lacks stamina. Owen pants heavily. Owen asks Sebas for effective ways to diet. Sebas suggests practicing magic. Owen is surprised, realizing magic exists in this world. Sebas explains that only aristocrats and a few commoners can use magic, making it a prerequisite for nobility. Owen realizes his parents are looked down upon because they can barely use magic. Sebas adds that magic uses a lot of energy, making it suitable for weight loss. Owen eagerly asks how to start. Sebas, unable to use magic himself, offers to call a specialist. Owen enthusiastically agrees. Several days later, Owen is excited for his first magic lesson. He greets his new teacher, Owen Sama. The teacher introduces herself as Katharina. Owen is struck by her beauty. Owen bows deeply, introducing himself. Katharina is surprised. She notes he seems different from what she imagined. Owen asks what she means. Katharina awkwardly brushes it off, unable to say he was described as a violent brat. She asks if they should start. Owen excitedly agrees to start the lesson. Katharina begins by explaining what magic is. Katharina explains that magic requires magic power, and the first step is perceiving it. She says magic relies on imagination, and chanting helps activate it. Owen asks how magic power feels. Katharina thinks for a moment. She asks if Owen has felt his. She says it differs among people. For her, it's a warmth around her body center. Owen says he doesn't understand, only feeling his body fat. Katharina tells him not to worry, as it usually takes a week. Suddenly, Owen feels something new in his body. He realizes he found his magic power. He excitedly tells Katharina. Katharina is shocked. She tells him to try moving the magic power around. Owen successfully does so. He sweats profusely, realizing he can definitely lose weight this way. Katharina asks him to produce a magic phenomenon next. She calls him a genius. Owen is happy to be praised. Katharina tells him to watch carefully as she demonstrates. She dismisses the rumors about him. She tells him to watch carefully. She explains that he needs to raise his awareness and conceptualize the desired phenomenon and chant, usually using the hand. Katharina chants and summons a fireball. Owen is amazed. Katharina then tells him to try it himself. Owen prepares to cast the spell. Owen focuses his power in his right hand. He finds it pretty draining. Katharina checks on him and he says he's fine. He imagines the effect and prepares to use magic. Owen chants and summons a ridiculously huge fireball. Katharina looks on in shock. Katharina is in disbelief that a child conjured such a large fireball. Owen is exhausted but pleased he managed to use magic. Suddenly Sebas rushes in, calling for Owen. Owen wakes up in bed, confused. Sebas asks if he has awoken. Owen asks where Katharina is, realizing he fell unconscious. Sebas explains she is in a discussion with his father in the parlor. Owen panics, realizing it's because of him, and rushes to the parlor. He bursts in, apologizing, as his father yells at Katharina for injuring his son. Katharina defends her parents when Black Pepper insults them. Black Pepper threatens to educate her. Owen intervenes, shouting at his father that he can't overlook this. Black Pepper asks what Owen wants. Owen clenches his fist. He knows he can't win an argument normally. He decides to step into the same ring. He declares he will teach Katharina her lessons. Black Pepper agrees. He tells Owen not to be lenient. Katharina is terrified. Owen closes the door. Katharina asks what Owen plans to do to her. Owen casually replies nothing in particular. Owen apologizes for his father. Katharina looks at him surprised. She realizes he rescued her. She is touched by his kindness. Katharina hugs Owen tightly. She declares she will protect him so he can live as a child should. Owen is flustered but happy, noting she's a good person, albeit with an impressive misunderstanding. 2 years later, Owen has continued his magic practice and can easily conjure a large fireball. He finds it incredibly fun. Owen has lost most of his weight. He still has a bit of a belly but is almost at his goal. Sebas tells him a letter has arrived. Owen opens the letter. The letter is an invitation to the 10th birthday celebration of the daughter of Ducal House Adelheid. Sebas says it would be bad to reject it. Owen wonders if his parents will go and decides to ask them. His parents refuse to go. They call it stupid. Owen winces at their reaction. They tell Owen to go by himself. Owen figures as much, knowing they probably just can't be bothered. Owen reflects on how aristocratic society revolves around magic ability, and his parents, who can barely use magic, have a complex about it. They avoid gatherings because of this complex. This applies to him too, as fat people are seen as poor magic users. He knows rejecting a duke's invitation would cause offense. Owen decides he has no choice but to go himself, despite being bad with social events. He remembers how he used to act before regaining his memories. He feels confident now that he's thinner. 1 week later, he arrives at the party. Owen is nervous, but hopes the etiquette Sebas taught him will be enough. He plans to overturn his bad reputation. He notices it's the Adelheid house. Natalie Adelheid, a brightly shining young girl, enters the party. She is the center of attention. People admire her, calling her a cute angel. Owen watches her from the crowd. Owen compares himself, an unsocial, infamous person, to the brightly shining young girl. He stands alone, observing. He realizes the worlds they live in are truly different. He looks out a window. Owen steps out onto a balcony. He finds it calming to be alone. He reflects on how Natalie seemed to have a shadow across her cheerful face, despite seeming blessed. He then notices a beautiful garden. Owen realizes someone else is on the balcony. He turns and is shocked to see Natalie Adelheid standing there. Startled by her sudden appearance, Owen admitted he hadn't expected anyone else to be out on the balcony. The young girl politely introduced herself as Natalie Adelheid, the daughter of the ducal family hosting the event. Owen offered a polite bow and introduced himself. Natalie immediately recognized his family name, bluntly asking if he belonged to the infamous House Pepper known for their arrogance and lack of magic. Instead of taking offense, Owen simply laughed and agreed, noting that his family's poor reputation had even reached the ducal house. Surprised by his honest admission, Natalie mentioned she had heard he was highly irritable and wondered why he wasn't angry. Owen calmly replied that he wouldn't lose his temper at a child, especially the star of the day's event. Natalie glared at him, sharply pointing out that he was speaking as if he weren't a child himself. Sweating nervously, Owen internally realized he had completely forgotten his current physical age. He awkwardly tried to brush it off by claiming he was just at an age where he wanted to act grown up, a statement Natalie found highly amusing. Giggling softly, she noted that he was quite a strange person and vastly different from the terrible rumors she had heard about him. Owen rubbed the back of his head and thanked her, though Natalie quickly clarified that she hadn't been praising him. She did admit, however, that he was a good distraction to help kill time. Curious, Owen asked if she was bored despite it being her own birthday celebration. Looking away, Natalie quietly agreed. Natalie explained that while the event was called a birthday party, it was actually just a societal debut to show her off to the nobility. She expressed her frustration at being constantly forced to maintain the strict, perfect conduct expected of a ducal daughter. As the centerpiece of the gathering, she had no choice but to entertain the guests endlessly. With a resigned sigh, she accepted it as her unavoidable duty for being born into such a high-ranking family. Owen listened in silence, reflecting on how birthdays in his previous life were always joyful occasions for children. He wondered if things were simply different for aristocratic children in this new world. Shaking off the thought, he firmly told Natalie that their time as children was incredibly precious and shouldn't be wasted feeling bored. He admitted with a smile that his own teacher had taught him that lesson, which gave him an idea. Reaching his hand out toward her, Owen enthusiastically invited Natalie to come play with him. Taken aback by the sudden offer, she stared at his outstretched hand in surprise. Owen urged her not to wear such a tedious expression on her own birthday, reminding her that she was the main character of the day. Natalie sarcastically agreed that it was special only because she had to entertain everyone else non-stop. Undeterred, Owen pointed out that spending her special day like that wasn't fun for her at all. Looking her straight in the eye, Owen emphasized that the only thing that truly mattered was what she herself wanted to do. As Natalie hesitated, unsure of how to respond, Owen gently but firmly grasped her hand. With a bright smile, Owen declared that since they were already friends, they should just go. Natalie repeated the word friends in quiet disbelief, having never experienced such casual camaraderie. When she asked where they could possibly go, Owen suggested they explore the garden below. Natalie panicked, pointing out they would be caught immediately if they went back through the main hall, but Owen confidently assured her he had a plan. Focusing his mana, Owen cast an earth spell, proudly showing off the results of his 2 years of intense magic training. To Natalie's absolute shock, a sturdy stone staircase rapidly materialized from the balcony down to the garden. Gesturing toward his newly created path, Owen cheerfully invited her to lead the way. Suddenly the balcony door opened, and Natalie's father stepped out, sternly demanding she return inside. Panicking at being caught, Owen immediately changed their plans and told Natalie to hold on to him tightly. Before she could process what was happening, Owen grabbed her and leaped directly off the balcony, casting a gravity release spell as they plummeted. Natalie let out a terrified shriek as they fell, but instead of hitting the ground, their descent rapidly slowed, enveloped in a soft, glowing aura of magic. Held securely in Owen's arms, Natalie opened her eyes to find them safely hovering high above the estate grounds, drifting gently through the night air. Looking around in pure awe, Natalie realized they were actually flying. She gasped in disbelief, asking if he was somehow using the legendary flight magic. Back on the balcony, Natalie's father watched in absolute shock, unable to comprehend that a child was using flight magic. Meanwhile, Owen cheerfully explained to Natalie that this was his specialty. He revealed that he had developed it by combining the modern scientific knowledge from his past life with his teacher's magical expertise. He explained that in their current world, people believed everything was simply bound to the earth, and since magic required a clear understanding of the phenomenon to work, that flawed common sense prevented anyone from flying. Owen elaborated that because he understood the true concept of gravity, he could properly visualize and control the magic to counteract it. He noted that flight was considered an incredibly rare and ancient art, previously only achievable by legendary witches of the past. Because of this lost knowledge, his teacher had told him that he was likely the only person in the modern era capable of taking to the skies. Overjoyed, Natalie laughed brightly, marveling at the amazing feeling of soaring through the night sky. Owen smiled, telling her to consider this magical flight as her birthday present, which she gratefully accepted. However, the strain of carrying two people soon caught up with Owen. Sweating profusely, he desperately tried to hold on, but eventually confessed that he had reached his limit and couldn't maintain the spell any longer. Natalie shrieked in panic as they suddenly began to plummet. Still high in the air, an indignant Natalie violently shook Owen, demanding he take back his comment about her being heavy. Owen quickly apologized for his bluntness. He breathed a heavy sigh of relief, reiterating that his mana was completely drained, and he truly couldn't have held on a second longer. With his power fading, they plummeted toward the estate's roof, Natalie screaming in terror before they finally managed to crash land safely in the garden. Catching her breath, Natalie admitted that Owen was actually quite amazing, wondering if his terrible reputation was just a clever disguise. Owen laughed awkwardly, blaming his past behavior on youthful indiscretion. He playfully repeated her earlier line about wanting to act grown up, making Natalie giggle at the callback. She noted that the trouble was worth it as long as she enjoyed her birthday, even if her father might treat him like a kidnapper now. Hearing the faint music drifting from the grand hall into the garden, Natalie suddenly asked if Owen knew how to dance, to which he nervously admitted he wasn't very good. Unbothered by his lack of experience, Natalie cheerfully suggested they dance right there in the garden. When Owen looked surprised, she teasingly pointed out that as the star of the party, she was supposed to open the dancing in the grand hall, so her abductor needed to take responsibility for ruining it. Feeling slightly guilty, Owen agreed, though he awkwardly warned her that he wasn't very skilled, and his hands were still sweaty from using so much magic. Pushing his insecurities aside, Owen gently offered his hand to the young lady, formally asking her for a dance if she was willing to accept his clumsy lead. With a warm smile, Natalie took his hand, and the two began to sway together beneath the moonlight. Despite his awkward movements and lack of practice, Owen gave it his absolute best effort, ensuring Natalie enjoyed her special night. Surrounded by the serene beauty of the illuminated garden and the faint melodies from the hall, this magical impromptu dance marked the unforgettable first encounter between Owen and Natalie. Standing before Natalie's imposing father, Ralph Adelheid, Owen braced himself for a scolding. The Duke sternly questioned why Owen had taken his daughter, prompting the boy to nervously explain that they had just become friends. Owen sweated under the intense pressure of the man's presence. Ralph muttered to himself, surprised that his daughter was on good terms with the eldest son of House Pepper. To the children's absolute shock, the Duke suddenly burst into hearty laughter. Relieved that it wasn't a malicious scoundrel who had taken his daughter, Ralph warmly asked Owen to continue getting along with Natalie before taking his leave. Natalie playfully teased him for getting so nervous, though Owen noted that her father possessed the physical and magical strength to crush him instantly. Letting out a massive sigh of relief, Owen collapsed slightly, thankful that the powerful Duke was a reasonable man. Shifting the topic, Natalie asked if Owen planned to attend a magic academy in the future. Owen confirmed that he would likely be attending Xansar, though he wasn't entirely sure of the details. Smiling brightly, Natalie expressed her hope that they would end up at the same school, but regardless, she looked forward to their new friendship. Happy to have made a genuine connection, Owen warmly agreed, and the two sealed their promise with a firm handshake. Upon returning to his estate, Owen was warmly welcomed back by his elderly butler. When asked how the party went, the young master cheerfully announced that he had made a friend, bringing a gentle smile to the old man's face. Curious about his own future, Owen then asked which magic academy he was scheduled to enroll in half a year from now. The butler happily informed him that his destination was also Xansar, causing Owen to pump his fist in excitement. Suggesting that the boy learn more about the academy, the butler pointed him toward his magic teacher, Katharina, who was an alumni of the school. During their next lesson, Katharina stood before the chalkboard and began her lecture on the structure of magic academies. Katharina explained that while magic schools were primarily for nobles, talented commoners were also obligated to attend and refine their skills for society's benefit. Raising his hand, Owen voiced his concern about the inevitable clashes between aristocrats and commoners. He worried about this dynamic, having witnessed his own parents' discriminatory behavior firsthand. The teacher acknowledged his worries but clarified that Xansar operated strictly as a meritocracy, meaning that a student's birth mattered far less than their actual magical ability. Hearing that his own hard work would determine his standing, Owen felt a renewed surge of motivation to push his magical limits. Lost in his ambitious thoughts about making friends and proving his prowess, Owen barely heard his teacher calling his name. Half a year quickly passed, and the day of his departure finally arrived. Standing by the estate's entrance with his luggage, Owen bid farewell to his butler and teacher, ready to begin his new life. Glancing around the empty foyer, Owen felt a pang of sadness that only two people had come to see him off. He quickly masked his disappointment, reasoning that his past vicious behavior had alienated the rest of the household. Though he deeply regretted not treating everyone with more kindness, he accepted that it was too late to change their minds now. Owen hung his head, certain that the staff still despised him for his previous tyrannical actions. He sincerely hoped they might forgive him by the time he returned. Hearing his somber confession, the butler simply chuckled and opened the front doors, suggesting that the young master see for himself. As the heavy doors swung open, Owen gasped in absolute shock. The entire household staff, from the maids to the chefs, were lined up outside, warmly calling out his name and wishing him a safe journey. The maids and cooks showered him with affectionate advice, urging him to study hard, stay safe, and eat properly while away. The butler smiled warmly, noting that whatever had caused Owen's sudden change in personality 2 years ago, it had completely transformed him for the better. The old man assured the young lord that everyone in the estate had already come to genuinely love the person he was today. Placing her hands gently on his shoulders, Katharina proudly backed up the butler's words, validating the immense effort Owen had put into bettering himself. Overwhelmed by the unexpected display of affection, tears welled up in Owen's eyes. He had fully prepared himself to be cast out into the cold, believing he couldn't simply erase the sins of his past self. Receiving such a heartfelt and warm send-off completely shattered his lingering guilt. Wiping away his tears, Owen loudly thanked everyone for continuing to care for him despite his past flaws. With a bright, determined smile, he promised to study diligently and return as a splendid lord capable of bringing happiness to them all. Touched by his vow, Katharina confessed that she was truly grateful to have been his magic teacher, having wanted to protect him long before he changed. Owen sincerely praised her as the best teacher he could have asked for, prompting her to pull him into a tight embrace. She reminded her precious pupil that she would always be on his side. With his heart full of newfound resolve, Owen departed on his carriage journey toward the royal capital. Upon safely arriving at the bustling city gates, he gazed out at the grand architecture, his chest pounding with excitement for the adventures that awaited him. The excitement was momentarily paused as Owen's carriage got caught in a massive traffic jam, likely caused by the influx of students heading to the academy. Deciding to wait patiently, his attention was suddenly drawn to an obnoxious voice shouting angrily from outside. Peeking through the window, Owen spotted an arrogant noble loudly demanding that others make way for his Marquis family. The aggressive boy continued to shout unreasonable demands, making Owen instantly want to avoid any involvement with him. However, the noble's tirade was interrupted by a calm, collected girl who firmly ordered him to remain quiet, reminding him that court ranks meant nothing in their current setting. Infuriated by the defiance, the boy glared at her and aggressively demanded to know who she was. Unfazed by his anger, the young girl politely introduced herself as Foreign Antonli. Owen was highly impressed by her courage. The arrogant noble scoffed, claiming he had never heard of such a house. Without missing a beat, Foreign bluntly clarified that she wasn't a noble at all, leaving the boy bewildered. The realization that a mere commoner was defying a Marquis family sent the boy into a furious rage. Foreign stood her ground, reiterating that the academy valued actual ability over social standing. Pushed past his breaking point, the noble rolled up his sleeves with a menacing glare. Watching the confrontation unfold, Owen realized the situation was escalating dangerously. Refusing to be humiliated, the enraged noble conjured a swirling mass of fire, threatening to unleash his magic directly at the defenseless commoner girl. The arrogant noble boy unleashes a blazing projectile directly at the defenseless girl. Just before the flames can make contact, Owen swiftly intercepts the attack, leaving the noble completely bewildered by the sudden interference. Checking over his shoulder, Owen ensures the girl is unharmed. She quietly expresses her gratitude for his timely rescue. Frustrated by the interruption, the aggressive noble demands to know who dared to step in his way. Introducing himself as the heir to the Pepper family, Owen draws a scoff from the noble, who mocks his house's declining status. Ignoring the insult, Owen sternly reprimands the boy for recklessly playing with dangerous magic. Infuriated, the noble questions why he should care about a mere commoner and challenges Owen's accusation. Meeting his intense glare, Owen coldly asks what else such a destructive act could possibly be called. Losing whatever little patience he had left, the noble recklessly fires off another blazing spell at point-blank range. Unfazed, Owen immediately counters with a freezing incantation. A massive, jagged pillar of ice erupts from the ground, completely neutralizing the flames. Perched atop the frozen structure, a woman suddenly appears, sternly declaring that the two boys have caused enough of a disturbance. The arrogant noble angrily questions the woman's identity, boasting about his own status as the future head of the Sylphid Duke family. His bravado quickly fades when he notices the prestigious 3-star badge pinned to her cloak, marking her as one of the kingdom's top magic users. Sighing at his obliviousness, the woman reveals that she is a teacher at the academy. She firmly scolds the boys for causing such a dangerous commotion right outside the school gates before they have even officially enrolled. Thoroughly reprimanded, the noble begrudgingly backs down while Owen offers a sincere apology. Farron watches the exchange quietly as the tension finally diffuses. Breathing a sigh of relief, Owen is thankful the situation didn't escalate further, though he notes his academy life has already gotten off to a chaotic start. Staring at the towering ice crystal, Owen marvels at the immense power of a 3-star magician and wonders if he can ever reach such heights. He reminds himself that he needs to settle into his dorm and unpack before getting too ahead of himself. Pumping his fist with renewed determination, he resolves to give his new school life his absolute best. The day of the entrance ceremony soon arrives, and Owen finds himself adjusting his new uniform. He notes his placement in Class A as he approaches the Grand Hall. Stepping inside, he immediately spots a familiar face among the crowd. Natalie warmly greets him, noting that it has been a while since they last saw each other. While Owen thinks she hasn't changed much, Natalie playfully teases him about looking a bit thinner and cooler than before. When she asks how he has been, Owen awkwardly admits he hasn't been doing great. Leaning in close, Natalie confesses that her days were incredibly tedious without him around. She adds that she could never forget the memorable night they shared, leaving Owen completely flustered. Her bold phrasing instantly sparks a wave of scandalous whispers among their eavesdropping classmates. Owen panics over the massive misunderstanding, fully aware of how her words sounded. Curious about the class assignment since there was no entrance exam, Owen asks how the school determines their placements. Natalie explains that the initial sorting is heavily based on family peerage, as magical potential is largely hereditary. She happily points out that they will likely be classmates for the next 8 years. Owen nervously agrees to do his best to keep up, as she notes they won't be re-evaluated for another 2 years. Their conversation is cut short when the teacher calls the room to order and instructs everyone to take their seats. The teacher reveals herself to be Chris Clifford, the same 3-star magician who broke up the fight outside the gates. Announcing that she will be their homeroom instructor, she notes that having a 3-star teach first years is highly exceptional. She commands silence and instructs the new students to begin their self-introductions in no particular order. A handsome boy confidently steps forward, immediately drawing swoons from the girls in the room. He introduces himself as Berg Ritten, the 3rd prince of the kingdom, and humbly requests that his classmates treat him as an equal despite his royal lineage. Next to introduce herself is Farron, the commoner girl from the gate incident. The room erupts in murmurs as the students realize she must be the rumored saint capable of wielding rare sacred magic. Owen is amazed by the sheer concentration of high-profile figures in his class, noting the presence of a prince, a saint, and a duke's daughter. Deciding to get it over with before the pressure builds, Owen stands up and states his name. The atmosphere instantly turns hostile as students whisper about his family's decline and his own infamous reputation as an inhuman failure. Clearing his throat, Owen nervously admits that the dark rumors about him are more widespread than he feared. Flashing a bright, genuine smile, he expresses his excitement to work with everyone. The class is taken aback by his polite demeanor, whispering among themselves that he seems like a perfectly normal person, completely contradicting the vicious tales they had heard. High above the academy grounds, a mysterious cloaked figure watches the new students with intense interest. Glaring down with a mixture of envy and malice, the shadowy observer singles out a target. They muse that this particular student might serve as an excellent test subject for a dark experiment, deciding to test the class's mettle first. Chris dismisses the standard curriculum as far too dull for her tastes, deciding to take an unconventional approach for her first day as a teacher. She abruptly orders the bewildered students to assemble at the training field so she can assess their magical capabilities firsthand. As the class makes their way through the sprawling grounds, Natalie cheerfully points out that the academy is practically a city unto itself, complete with vast practice fields and a bustling business district. Owen can only nod in agreement, taking in the sheer scale of their new school. Upon arriving at the elementary practice field, Chris gathers the students to briefly review the fundamentals of magic. Conjuring small manifestations of fire, water, earth, and wind, she quizzes the class on why these specific forces are categorized as the 4 primary elements. Prince Berg promptly answers that those phenomena are the most familiar and therefore the easiest to visualize. Confirming his answer, Chris explains that magic materializes in direct accordance with the caster's imagination, effortlessly summoning a massive, jagged pillar of solid ice to demonstrate her point. The students watch in awe as Chris attributes her proficiency with ice magic to her upbringing in a snowy region, which gave her a deep understanding of the cold. She then challenges the class to strike the icy wall with their best spells, eager to see what they have prepared. However, as the first few students step up and unleash incredibly weak streams of magic, Chris can barely hide her profound disappointment at their current skill levels. Stepping up to the challenge, Prince Berg utilizes body-strengthening magic to launch himself forward, striking the ice with a powerful lightning lance that shatters a large chunk of the wall. Chris nods in quiet approval at his impressive display. The rest of the class erupts into cheers, thoroughly impressed by the incredible talents of the royal and noble students. Caught up in the excitement, Owen decides to test his own limits and unleashes a massive, roaring fireball that completely dwarfs the previous attempts, leaving everyone utterly stunned by its sheer size. The awe is abruptly cut short when Dominic maliciously fires a spell directly at Owen. Though the attack misses its intended target, it grazes Foran's hand, leaving a painful burn. As Owen glares at the arrogant noble in disbelief, Foran tries to downplay the injury, but Owen immediately insists on treating it. Before Owen can act, Foran gently pulls her hand away and calls upon her sacred light, effortlessly healing the burn in a matter of seconds. Owen watches in wide-eyed astonishment as the wound vanishes completely, while Chris observes with a knowing smile, silently praising the young saintess's rare abilities. Owen's awe is quickly interrupted by Natalie, who silently creeps up beside him and playfully asks if the saintess is his preferred type of girl. Startled, Owen quickly explains that he only helped Foran because Dominic had been picking a fight with her earlier. Unconvinced, Natalie continues to tease him about his supposed preferences, causing Owen to frantically deny her accusations. Refusing to drop the subject, Natalie steps closer and demands to know exactly what kind of girl he actually likes. Owen internally sweats, realizing his exact type perfectly matches Natalie's blonde hair and blue eyes, but he finds himself far too embarrassed to confess it to her face. Fortunately, he is saved by the bell when Chris calls his name, noting that he is the last student left to demonstrate his magic, prompting a relieved Owen to eagerly sprint toward the practice wall. As Owen steps up to the wall, the surrounding students begin to whisper, recalling the harsh rumors about the Pepper family's supposedly abysmal magical prowess. Feeling the weight of their judgmental stares, Owen reconsiders using his massive fireball, not wanting to draw further comparisons to Dominic's previous attack. Instead, a confident smirk crosses his face as he decides to showcase a completely different application of his power. Channeling his energy, Owen casts a gravity manipulation spell and effortlessly lifts himself off the ground. The entire class watches in stunned silence as he floats midair, with Chris staring in absolute disbelief at the advanced technique. The students immediately break into a heated debate, struggling to comprehend how a supposedly untalented noble could perform such a feat. While some dismiss it as a simple wind spell, Chris firmly corrects them, confirming that Owen is utilizing genuine, highly complex flight magic. As Owen hovers proudly above the training field, Dominic glares up at him, his irritation growing as he completely dismisses the display as a cheap parlor trick. Having seen enough, Chris claps her hands to gather everyone's attention and officially concludes their first practical assessment. Flashing a confident smile, she assures the students that regardless of their current skill levels, she will personally mold them into capable magicians. With that, she dismisses the class for the day, allowing Owen to finally drop his spell and land safely back on the ground. As the crowd disperses, Natalie approaches Owen and asks if he has any plans for the afternoon, when he mentions he is just heading back to the dorms. She brightly suggests they explore the academy's bustling business district together. Realizing this could essentially be their first date, Owen eagerly accepts her invitation. The two of them take a leisurely stroll through the vibrant shopping district, taking in the sights of the various storefronts, when Natalie curiously asks what he intends to purchase. Owen casually admits he doesn't actually need anything, as his family had already sent all his necessities from home. Natalie just laughs, her bright smile instantly melting Owen's heart as she declares that today is simply about exploring their new home. Enjoying the relaxed atmosphere, the pair happily wander through the district, admiring the local jewelry stalls and sharing a few freshly grilled skewers along the way. Their peaceful afternoon is abruptly shattered by a sudden, terrified scream echoing from down the street. Turning toward the commotion, Owen and Natalie spot a deeply unhinged student stumbling through the crowd. The boy drops his belongings and begins frantically demanding medicine, his erratic twitching and deranged expression sending a wave of panic through the surrounding shoppers. Completely losing control, the crazed student violently lunges straight toward Natalie, desperately screaming for his fix. With the attacker closing the distance in a split second, Owen quickly realizes that charging a fireball would take far too long and risk catching bystanders in the blast. Thinking fast, Owen immediately casts his gravity magic, making himself weightless just long enough to launch forward and brutally tackle the deranged student to the cobblestone path. Pinning the frantic boy down, Owen quickly assures a worried Natalie that he is perfectly unharmed. Before the situation can escalate further, Prince Berg pushes through the crowd and hurriedly apologizes for the disturbance. He explains that the restrained boy is a close friend who suffers from severe neurosis and must have run out of his prescribed sedatives. As the prince carefully helps his friend away, Owen watches them leave, a calculating glint in his eye as he realizes he has just stumbled upon an incredibly valuable opportunity. Owen reflects on his earlier display of flight magic, admitting to himself that he had only used it to test if Dominic's arrogant nature could be manipulated for his own gain. However, as he watches the prince escort the highly unstable student away, Owen's smirk widens. He decides that this deeply troubled boy might serve as a far more interesting and useful pawn in his future schemes. 2 weeks after the entrance ceremony, the students have settled into their new daily routines. During a lecture on the 3 states of magic power, Owen finds himself struggling to stay awake, noting that the complex theories remind him a bit too much of his past life's chemistry classes despite his love for magic. Out on the elementary practice field, Chris shifts the lesson to the practical application of magic control. She demonstrates how focusing magic power onto a single point is a fundamental technique that the students can already perform to a lesser extent. Chris explains that mastering this focus allows a caster to activate magic in distant spaces, a technique commonly known as long-distance magic. She notes that while the school doesn't heavily emphasize it due to its increasing difficulty and diminishing returns over distance, the fundamental concept remains vital. Unimpressed, Owen whispers to Berg, questioning the practical point of such a demanding skill. To prove her point, Chris abruptly summons a massive block of ice directly above a terrified Dominic's head. With a simple snap of her fingers, Chris shatters the ice into harmless snow before it can crush the boy. As the class watches in sparkling awe, she casually explains that long-distance casting allows for a much wider variety of unpredictable attacks. She elaborates that relying solely on projectiles fired from the body allows an opponent to easily predict and block the trajectory. However, introducing a sudden attack from above forces the enemy to divide their attention across multiple vectors, rapidly wearing down their concentration. Emphasizing the clear advantage it provides in combat, Chris passionately declares that the difference between those who can and cannot use long-distance magic is staggering. She mentions knowing someone capable of freely controlling spells from tens of meters away, though she assures the students she doesn't expect them to reach quite that level yet. Instructing the class to practice activating their favored spells at increasing distances, Chris opens the floor for questions. As the students begin their attempts, Owen struggles to manifest his magic away from his body, realizing just how incredibly skilled his former tutor, Katharina, must have been to perform it so effortlessly. Wanting some advice, but deterred by the massive line forming around their teacher, Owen decides to seek help elsewhere. Spotting Berg nearby, Owen approaches the prince and asks him to share the trick to long-distance casting, reasoning that Berg's proficiency with body strengthening must mean he has excellent magic control. To Owen's shock, Berg cheerfully admits that he actually cannot use conventional magic at all. The prince explains that his body strengthening relies entirely on circulating magic power internally to boost his physical abilities, rather than materializing intended phenomena in the outside world. Owen immediately sympathizes, understanding how difficult it must be for a royal to lack magical talent in a country that highly values such abilities. Berg waves off the concern, sharing that meeting a teacher he deeply respects helped him overcome those insecurities. Hearing this, Owen wholeheartedly agrees with the sentiment. After apologizing for taking up his time, Owen returns to his own practice, both boys determined to do their best. Despite his continued efforts, Owen finds his absolute limit is a mere 50 centimeters away from his body, and the lesson concludes before he can figure out how to extend his reach. Refusing to give up, Owen sneaks out to the practice field that night to continue his training. Sitting in deep meditation, he reminds himself that magic in this world is entirely based on imagination. He hopes that by breaking free of common sense, he can pull off something amazing just like he did with his flight spell. Drawing on the vast knowledge of video games from his previous life, Owen begins to visualize legendary swords and terrifying monsters. An exciting idea suddenly clicks into place, and he leaps up with renewed enthusiasm, realizing just how incredibly fun magic can truly be. The following day, Chris excitedly announces to the class that the school's highly anticipated martial tournament is about to begin. She explains that the first-year students will be participating in a team battle, and she has already selected their class's representatives. The class murmurs in awe as Chris names Prince Berg as the first representative. She then announces the talented Natalie as the second member of the team. However, the room falls silent in shock when she casually reveals Owen as her final choice. Owen frantically stammers, completely failing to understand why he was picked over the other capable students. Before Chris can answer, Dominic furiously slams his fist onto his desk, loudly declaring that he refuses to accept her decision. Dominic demands to know why a member of the ruinous Pepper family was chosen instead of him. Unfazed by his outburst, Chris calmly asks if he is doubting her judgment. She questions if he is simply upset that he wasn't selected himself. Gritting his teeth, Dominic boldly confirms that she is absolutely correct. Acknowledging his frustration, Chris proposes a simple solution to settle the matter. She announces that they will hold a mock battle between Owen and Dominic, with the victor earning the coveted spot in the tournament, sending the rest of the class into an excited uproar. Meanwhile, Owen internally sighs at how quickly the situation escalated, though he admits that a duel is the most straightforward way to resolve the dispute. Dominic eagerly accepts the challenge, confident that he will easily crush the infamous Pepper heir and claim his rightful place. As Dominic aggressively threatens to kill him, Owen merely notes that the noble's arrogant attitude is incredibly cliché. The class quickly relocates to the outdoor practice field. Chris lays out the straightforward rules, stating that the match ends when she officially calls the winner. She also adds that a victory can be claimed if one side completely surrenders. The moment Chris signals the start of the match, Dominic wastes absolutely no time. He immediately conjures a massive, swirling fireball and launches it directly at Owen. His clear intention is to end the fight in a single, devastating strike. Reacting instantly, Owen summons a sturdy wall of flames to intercept the incoming projectile. The two spells violently collide, but Owen's defensive barrier successfully repels the massive fireball, leaving Dominic visibly shocked that his attack was so easily neutralized. Assessing the situation, Owen considers using his gravity magic to take to the skies, but quickly realizes that staying airborne against a rapid-fire magic user would just turn him into an easy target. Instead, he decides this is the perfect opportunity to test out the new technique he developed the night before, promising to show Dominic what true firepower looks like. Channeling his mana, Owen dramatically thrusts his hand into the air and calls upon the name of a legendary fire spirit from his past life's gaming lore, commanding it to arrive and annihilate his foe. Responding to his vivid imagination, a towering, monstrous entity composed entirely of roaring flames materializes behind Owen, radiating an intense, suffocating heat that instantly dwarfs Dominic's previous spells. With a confident grin, Owen commands the blazing behemoth to charge forward. The gigantic fire spirit surges across the practice field, leaving a trail of scorched earth in its wake as it bears down on the terrified noble. From the sidelines, Berg and Natalie watch in absolute awe as the terrifying manifestation of Owen's power completely dominates the battlefield. Paralyzed by fear, Dominic can only stare up at the towering inferno. The beast raises a massive, burning fist and violently slams it down toward the terrified student. Seeing the sheer destructive force of his creation, Owen suddenly realizes he poured way too much imagination into the spell. Having completely lost control of the beast, a panicking Owen desperately screams for Dominic to dodge before the spirit crushes him. Just before the fatal blow connects, Chris instantly intervenes, encasing the raging fire spirit in a colossal glacier of solid ice. Dropping to her knees with an exhausted sigh, she scolds Owen for taking things entirely too far. A highly embarrassed Owen apologizes to his teacher and checks on a trembling Dominic, admitting he got a little carried away. Having witnessed the overwhelming display of power, Chris officially declares Owen the winner and the final representative for the tournament. Despite the near disaster, Owen smiles to himself, happily concluding that his new school life is going swimmingly well. The day of the Zantsar Academy martial arts tournament arrives, bringing a lively atmosphere to the bustling city. Observing the massive crowds from a balcony, Owen comments on the vibrant energy filling the arena. Fireworks erupt across the sky as the tournament officially begins. The announcer details the rules, explaining that students will compete using magic in designated arenas with outcomes judged by referees. It is also established that the elementary department matches will be decided by a best 2 out of 3 format. Inside the player waiting room, the first-year team prepares for their debut. Natalie points out that their initial opponent is a third-year student, making Owen visibly nervous. Berg confidently backs up Natalie, assuring a skeptical Owen that they can easily secure a victory. The young prince explains that the current upperclassmen simply aren't strong enough to pose a threat to their combined power. Natalie agrees with Berg, telling Owen there is absolutely nothing to worry about because of their sheer strength. However, Owen internally sweats, realizing he has only ever fought his former tutor and Dominic, leaving him completely unsure of how his abilities stack up against normal students. Still doubting himself, Owen asks why he was chosen as their team captain. Both Natalie and Berg immediately state that it is simply because he is the strongest among them. While Owen tries to humbly credit his past life's knowledge for his skills, Natalie quickly shuts down his modesty. The announcer calls the first-year team to the arena, asking their vanguard to step forward. Berg eagerly rises to the occasion, practically radiating confidence as he promises to give it his all. As Berg enters the arena, the crowd erupts into wild cheers, completely enamored by the young prince's charm. Watching from the sidelines, Owen denies feeling any jealousy as the first match officially commences. Berg swiftly secures a victory, with the referee officially declaring him the winner of the first bout. Motivated by her teammate's success, Natalie confidently steps forward, declaring that it is finally her turn to fight. Taking the middle position, Natalie is greeted by an even wilder roar from the spectators. Owen completely understands the crowd's intense reaction as the referee signals the start of the second match. Natalie completely overwhelms her opponent with a relentless barrage of lightning strikes. Observing her dominant performance, Owen notes that the Adelheid family specializes in such magic, and Natalie's abundant mana reserves leave her foe with absolutely no chance to counterattack. The announcer officially declares Natalie the winner of her bout. Owen suddenly realizes that with both Berg and Natalie securing victories, their team has already won the round under the best 2 out of 3 rule. The realization hits Owen hard as he cries out in frustration, completely devastated that he didn't even get a chance to fight. Meanwhile, Berg and Natalie cheerfully celebrate another dominating win for the first years. Owen's despair only deepens when he realizes he was benched for the second set of matches as well. He dramatically laments that winning without doing anything makes him feel entirely useless. With their matches concluded for the day, Natalie suggests they grab some lunch. Hearing this, Owen feels a pang of sympathy, recalling how his parents from his previous life always attended his sports events. Natalie notices his quiet demeanor, but their attention is quickly drawn to a massive crowd of non-students swarming the area to watch the tournament. Walking through the crowd, the trio overhears spectators praising the incredible skills of the third prince and the duchess. The gossiping onlookers speculate on whether the first years can defeat the student council president, while simultaneously dismissing their captain as a weakling who isn't even a threat. The spectators specifically name Owen, spreading rumors that he is completely incompetent. They cruelly assume he was only placed on the team as a throwaway pawn to lower the president's guard, leaving Owen to awkwardly listen to his own harsh public reputation. Unable to tolerate the insults, an infuriated Natalie storms up to the gossiping crowd and fiercely berates them for spouting nonsense. She loudly defends Owen, declaring that they know absolutely nothing about his true capabilities because they blindly believe baseless rumors. Grabbing a highly flustered Owen, Natalie passionately shouts that he is strong enough to win the entire tournament by himself. Before the bewildered spectators can react, she quickly drags her captain away from the scene. Once they are alone, Owen gently asks Natalie why she got so angry over people insulting him. Tears begin to well up in her eyes as she admits that hearing those horrible things about him was just incredibly frustrating. Seeing Natalie cry on his behalf deeply moves Owen. Determined to prove his worth and silence the doubters, he confidently asks his teammates to let him fight the student council president in their final match. Touched by Natalie's tears, Owen asks if she will let him fight the student council president. After a brief moment of silence, Natalie agrees, but strictly demands that he promise to win the match. Owen prepares himself to face off against the formidable student council president, fully aware of the challenge that lies ahead. Back in the waiting room, Berg easily agrees to the plan, believing it is best for Owen to take on the president. He notes that as long as Natalie is fine with the arrangement, he fully supports it. Berg admits that hearing the crowd ridicule his friend did not sit well with him either, a sentiment that deeply moves Owen. Berg warns the team that the president usually targets the opposing team's best players, predicting he might try to face Natalie in the middle match. He cautions Owen that defeating the upperclassman will not be an easy task, given his formidable reputation. Owen nervously recalls the rumors labeling the president as the absolute strongest student. When Natalie asks Berg if the upperclassman is truly as powerful as everyone claims, Berg confirms the president's strength, noting that as a wind magic user, his abilities might naturally counter Owen's fire magic. Owen acknowledges the importance of elemental matchups but realizes the true problem lies in the president's flawless technique. The older student surrounds himself in a vortex, leaving absolutely no openings in either his offensive strikes or his defensive maneuvers. Berg explains that the president utilizes a powerful, wide-range defensive wall capable of repelling any normal magic. Furthermore, his offense is just as relentless, overwhelming opponents with high-powered barrages that leave them no room to breathe. The prince continues detailing the president's wealth of experience and excellent judgment. Hearing this flawless combat profile causes Owen to panic over how overpowered his upcoming opponent sounds. Berg concludes that their only real chance of victory is to prevent the president from gaining momentum by tricking him into underestimating Owen. Berg suggests that Owen should use physical enhancement magic immediately to launch a swift surprise attack. Although Owen doubts his ability to execute such a high-level maneuver so quickly, he agrees that a surprise assault is their best strategy. Natalie playfully reassures him that she will support him even if he loses, prompting Owen to fiercely remind her of his promise to win. Amused by his intense reaction, Natalie giggles and tells him she was only joking. Knowing he cannot defeat the president through conventional methods, Owen realizes they need a solid plan. He enthusiastically asks his friends for tips on body-strengthening magic, determined to prepare as much as possible before the match tomorrow. The following day, the tournament resumes with Berg effortlessly securing another victory in the first match. As the announcer calls Owen for the second bout, the young boy steps forward to face a wave of loud boos from the skeptical crowd. The spectators continue to hurl insults, loudly anticipating a boring match against a perceived weakling. The atmosphere instantly shifts to roaring applause as the third-year student council president, Kaizef Standard, confidently enters the arena. Listening to the crowd enthusiastically cheer for Kaizef while demanding he show no mercy, the president notes the stark contrast in their reception. Kaizef casually admits to Owen that he expected to face Natalie in this round, feeling his predictions were bested. Owen is left utterly confused by the upperclassman's strategic disappointment. Kaizef explains his assumption that defeating Natalie would guarantee an easy overall victory for his team, shrugging off the miscalculation. Owen humbly replies that he isn't entirely confident in his own strength, but steps forward with determination, driven by the trust Natalie placed in him. Kaizef politely requests that the first year go easy on him. Ignoring the pleasantries, Owen fiercely declares that he intends to strike with absolutely everything he has. The moment the match officially begins, Owen immediately applies physical enhancement magic to his legs and dashes forward for a preemptive strike. However, Kaizef instantly retaliates by casting a barrage of sharp wind blades. The swift counterattack forces Owen into a frantic evasion to avoid being sliced. Spotting a brief opening, Owen leaps into the air and unleashes a rapid barrage of fireballs. Unfazed, Kaizef smoothly summons a rising vortex of wind that completely deflects the fiery assault. Landing back on the ground, Owen is astounded by how seamlessly the president transitions between offense and defense. Refusing to give up despite his initial strategy failing, the young boy steals his resolve. Owen gathers his mana and initiates a massive, high-tier fire incantation to break through the defenses. A colossal, roaring beast composed entirely of scorching hellfire erupts from Owen's outstretched hand, dominating the arena. The sheer scale of the magic leaves the audience in absolute shock. Watching from the sidelines, Berg and Natalie smile, thoroughly impressed by their captain's raw power. Kaizef stares up at the towering inferno bearing down on him. The fiery entity crashes into the arena floor, generating a massive, blinding explosion. Panting from the exertion, Owen wonders if his most powerful, albeit chance-shortened, spell was enough to secure the victory. Suddenly, a massive, raging blade of wind slices cleanly through the thick smoke. The sudden counterattack completely catches Owen off guard. The powerful gust strikes Owen directly, sending him tumbling backward across the arena tiles. Watching from the waiting area, Berg and Natalie cry out his name in concern. Emerging from the dissipating smoke, Kaizeff sincerely apologizes for underestimating the first year's capabilities. Now surrounded by an incredibly fierce and impenetrable tempest, Kaizeff acknowledges Owen's strength, but declares that his wind barrier cannot be broken. Struggling to withstand the intense gale, Owen realizes he is finally facing the Student Council president's true, unbridled power. Kaizeff announces his intention to use his full strength, summoning a massive, swirling vortex of wind that instantly dominates the arena. Owen braces himself against the intensifying gale, his expression hardening as he prepares for the onslaught. The fierce winds expand outward, creating a towering tornado that engulfs the center of the battlefield. The sheer force of the expanding cyclone pushes Owen back, forcing him to slide across the arena floor. He struggles to maintain his footing against the overwhelming pressure. The crowd erupts into cheers, fully supporting the president's overwhelming display of power, while Natalie watches in deep concern. Owen attempts to cast his fire magic, but the relentless wind blades continuously track his movements. The harsh gales extinguish his spells before they can even fully form, leaving him entirely on the defensive. Realizing that holding back will only guarantee his defeat, Owen decides he must risk taking damage to land a decisive blow. The colossal fire beast crashes into the cyclone, but instead of breaking through, the flames are violently shredded and scattered by the rotating wind currents. Owen stares in absolute shock as his most powerful magic dissipates completely. He realizes with dread that his ultimate attack failed to leave a single scratch on Kaizeff's defenses. Capitalizing on Owen's momentary vulnerability, Kaizeff launches a swift counterattack that sends the younger boy tumbling across the ground. The president calmly advises his opponent to surrender, pointing out that Owen's lack of experience as a first-year is the deciding factor in this battle. Owen struggles to recover from the impact as the upperclassman dismisses his efforts. Believing the match is already decided, Kaizeff prepares to deliver the final blow. A vicious torrent of wind blades strikes Owen directly, tearing through his defenses. Blood splatters across the arena tiles from the sheer force of the president's relentless assault. The brutal impact leaves his teammates watching in stunned silence as the young mage takes a devastating hit. Murmurs ripple through the crowd as spectators begin to fear for Owen's life amidst the overwhelming storm. Berg watches in awe, completely stunned by the sheer magnitude of the Student Council president's power. Unable to bear watching her friends suffer any longer, Natalie tearfully attempts to rush into the arena to stop the fight. Berg quickly grabs her arm to hold her back, firmly reminding her of the promise Owen made to emerge victorious. Berg urges Natalie to look closely at Owen, pointing out that the fierce determination in his eyes proves he has not given up. Owen grits his teeth against the pain, his focused gaze revealing his refusal to surrender. Moved by his unwavering resolve, Natalie desperately screams Owen's name, pouring all her hope into a tearful cheer. Hearing Natalie's desperate plea cuts through the chaos, snapping Owen out of his despair. Analyzing the swirling typhoon that forms the impenetrable barrier, Owen desperately searches for a way to break through. He suddenly notices a crucial detail about the wind's structure, sparking a risky new strategy in his mind. Deducing that every typhoon must have a calm eye at its center, Owen decides to bet everything on a single, daring maneuver. Channeling his magic into his legs, he prepares to execute a high-risk jump. He activates a gravitational release spell and launches himself high into the air, aiming directly above the swirling vortex. Kaizeff stares upward in pure shock, completely caught off guard by his opponent's sudden vertical ascent. Natalie and Berg watch in bewilderment as their friend leaps far beyond normal human limits. Natalie marvels at the first-year student's apparent ability to fly above the battlefield. Kaizeff recognizes the technique as the legendary flight magic Owen had previously demonstrated in class. Berg and Natalie watch anxiously as Owen reaches the apex of his massive leap. The president is deeply confused, knowing that executing such advanced wind magic should be impossible with the arena's current air currents. Hovering momentarily at the peak of his jump, Owen confirms his theory was correct. He observes that the violent winds are only swirling around Kaizeff's perimeter, leaving the airspace directly above the president completely undefended. Seizing the perfect opportunity, Owen combines his physical reinforcement and gravitational release magic to execute a devastating high-speed free fall. He plummets straight down through the unprotected eye of the storm, taking Kaizeff completely by surprise. Descending with immense momentum, Owen delivers a crushing iron fist directly into the president's guard. Natalie and Berg celebrate excitedly as Owen successfully bypasses the impenetrable wind barrier. Despite the heavy blow, Kaizev quickly regains his footing and attempts to cast another spell. Owen fiercely charges forward, determined to keep the pressure on and prevent his opponent from recovering. Recalling the rigorous training sessions with his mentor, Owen remembers that the core of martial arts relies on breaking an opponent's posture. He thinks back to the specific advice on catching enemies off guard when they are distracted. Noting that Kaizev is entirely focused on guarding his upper body, Owen prepares to exploit this critical blind spot. Owen swiftly changes his attack trajectory, aiming a sweeping kick at Kaizev's legs to disrupt his balance. By destroying the president's footing, Owen ensures that Kaizev cannot accurately aim his magic. He proudly declares that his extensive combat training with his mentors has prepared him for this exact moment. The sudden leg sweep sends Kaizev stumbling forward, completely breaking his defensive stance. Taking full advantage of the opening, Owen reminds the president that his training wasn't limited to just magic. He drives another devastating iron fist directly into Kaizev's abdomen, knocking the wind out of him. To finish the staggering combo, Owen unleashes a colossal fireball at point-blank range, engulfing Kaizev in a massive explosion. The massive magical blast completely overwhelms the president's remaining defenses. As the smoke begins to clear, Owen drops to his knees, exhausted, and pleads with his opponent to stay down. The dust settles to reveal Kaizev slumped against the heavily cracked arena wall, completely incapacitated. The defeated president remains motionless, signaling the definitive end of the grueling battle. The announcer's voice rings out over the stunned silence, officially declaring Owen as the victor, which sends the massive crowd into an absolute frenzy of cheers. Overjoyed by the miraculous victory, Berg and Natalie sprint onto the battlefield and tackle Owen in a tight, celebratory embrace. The three friends share a moment of pure relief and happiness after surviving the intense tournament. In the stands, the audience praises Kaizev's incredible performance despite his loss, acknowledging his undeniable talent. The spectators cheer as the first-year team is presented with their hard-earned championship trophy. Meanwhile, an older student watches the award ceremony with bitter tears, deeply envious of the adoration and glory being showered upon the young champions. At the victory celebration party, the grand hall echoes with the headmaster's speech, but Owen's attention is entirely elsewhere. A deeply embarrassed Natalie tries to hold him back from causing a scene. Struggling to control his primal hunger, he desperately begs for just a tiny taste of the feast before him. As the headmaster continues his long-winded address to the tournament winners, Owen completely ignores the formalities. Drooling profusely over the lavish banquet, he tries to dive into the roasted meats, forcing Natalie to physically restrain him so he does not embarrass their team. Once the feast officially begins, Owen wastes no time stuffing his cheeks to their absolute limit. When Natalie warns him about overeating, he argues that his intense magical battles and strict diet justify the massive binge. His gluttony is suddenly interrupted when a familiar voice addresses him from behind, catching him completely off guard. The newcomer chides Owen for focusing solely on the food, reminding him that the celebration is a prime opportunity to network with influential figures from other magic schools. Owen awkwardly admits his hesitation in starting conversations with strangers. Before they can continue, a striking blonde woman approaches to greet the newcomer, calling her Ren. The blonde woman playfully teases Ren, who quickly grabs Owen to use him as a shield. Recovering from the surprise, Ren recognizes the woman as Chris, confirming that her old acquaintance is now teaching at the prestigious Central Magic School. The conversation shifts to the collaborative nature of the four major magic schools, which frequently observe each other's events to exchange ideas. Chris compliments the impressive comeback of a student named Pepper in the finals, noting her surprise at witnessing legendary flight magic. Owen listens in awe as the teachers casually discuss the tournament's highlights. Leaning in uncomfortably close, Chris flashes a chilling smile and asks Owen if he has a particular interest in witches. The sudden, intense proximity and her eerie demeanor leave the young mage completely paralyzed with fear. Ren swiftly intervenes, pulling the intimidating teacher away and accusing her of trying to poach her student. Chris innocently brushes off the accusation, claiming she was merely curious about his abilities. To prove she already has capable pupils, Chris calls one of her own first-year students over to introduce them. A timid boy named Thor steps forward to introduce himself. While Ren observes that his quiet demeanor contrasts with his undeniable talent, Owen is immediately put on edge. Despite the boy's polite greeting, Owen detects a sharp, unmistakable aura of hostility radiating from him. As Chris and Thor excuse themselves, Owen notes that the boy made absolutely no effort to hide his glaring animosity. Ren sighs and explains her complicated history with Chris, revealing that they used to be close when she was her senior at Zansar. She adds that a mysterious incident from their past fundamentally changed Chris's personality. Ren offers Owen a piece of advice, noting how a single event can drastically alter a person's path. Her nostalgic reflection is interrupted when Chris suddenly reappears, prompting Ren to casually refer to her as Katharina. Owen freezes in absolute shock, his jaw dropping as Ren casually mentions that the two teachers were actually classmates. Owen completely loses his composure, unable to process the revelation that his mentors share such a deep history. Katharina proudly declares that they were fierce rivals constantly battling for the top spot, much to Ren's visible embarrassment. Owen questions Katharina's smug attitude, especially when she boasts about always being the superior mage. Katharina affectionately embraces a flustered Ren, cementing their complicated but close bond. Catching Owen's bewildered expression, Ren defensively snaps at him for jumping to weird conclusions. Eager to change the subject, she orders her student to stop wasting time and go mingle with the other attendees. Banished from his teacher's side, Owen wanders through the crowded hall, finding the prospect of socializing with elite strangers incredibly daunting. He decides to seek refuge in a quiet corner, only to be immediately intercepted. A cheerful first-year girl named Monet introduces herself, excitedly declaring that she is a massive fan of his tournament performance. Monet vigorously shakes his hands, expressing her profound gratitude that he defeated such an irritating opponent in the finals. Owen is entirely bewildered by her intense enthusiasm, unsure if her harsh words are directed at him or someone else. He cautiously asks for clarification, trying to understand the source of her sudden fiery passion. Their conversation is cut short when Ren approaches to greet her student. Monet's cheerful demeanor instantly vanishes, replaced by glaring hostility as she declares that seeing her teacher makes her want to throw a punch. Unfazed by the outburst, Ren calmly suggests that Monet's anger stems from her constant defeats during their joint training sessions. Monet vehemently denies any friendly connection, insisting that they are bitter enemies. Ren merely laughs off the hostility, fondly recalling how they hit it off during a social event and declaring them friends in spirit. Watching their loud bickering, Owen dryly observes that their constant arguing is actually proof of a very close bond. As Monet continues to swing her arms in frustration, Owen suddenly pieces together a crucial detail. He recalls a shy boy with the exact same hair color wearing a central uniform earlier. The realization hits him like a lightning bolt as he connects Monet to the very opponent he defeated in the finals. Monet casually dismisses her relationship with her brother, admitting they rarely speak despite him being a decent person. Their conversation is abruptly derailed when Owen's massive feast finally catches up with him. Clutching his gut in agony, he realizes he desperately needs to find a restroom before disaster strikes. Excusing himself from the girls, Owen frantically shuffles through the unfamiliar corridors of the building. With no idea where the facilities are located, his panic steadily rises. Hearing voices echoing from around a corner, he decides to approach the strangers for directions. Peeking cautiously around the corner, Owen spots Katharina engaged in a tense conversation with an unidentified man. Sensing the heavy atmosphere and realizing it might be a private dispute between teachers, he decides it is none of his business. Opting for self-preservation, he silently turns and sprints in the opposite direction. In his desperate rush, Owen violently collides with someone in the hallway. Recovering from the impact, he discovers it is Thor, the timid boy from earlier. To their mutual relief, both boys realize they are suffering from the exact same gastric emergency and are equally lost. Thor quickly points out that the restroom is just around the corner, having already found it himself. Shouting his profound thanks, Owen dashes toward his salvation at top speed. Left alone in the corridor, Thor watches the frantic first-year disappear, surprised by his complete lack of ulterior motives. A genuine smile crosses Thor's face as he concludes that his new acquaintance is a rather interesting fellow. Meanwhile, oblivious to the quiet boy's scrutiny, Owen bursts through the restroom doors, entirely focused on ending his suffering. Having successfully averted a major crisis, Owen emerges from the restroom with a look of absolute bliss. Thus, the intense martial arts tournament concludes, leaving the young mage with an improved reputation and the lingering memory of a terrible stomachache. Faran recognized it as an orc, a creature that typically required a group of mages to take down. Faran and Emilia stumbled upon a hideous, giant pig-faced demon. The massive high orc let out a guttural roar. The cloaked observer recalled how Owen Pepper had prepared a highly concentrated miasma stone specifically to summon this high orc. They watched with twisted amusement, wondering how the boy planned to survive a beast that normally required an elite squad, eager to see if he possessed more types of witchcraft. The hidden observer cursed Farron's foolishness as the boy loudly announced his spell. The orc immediately targeted him, raising its massive fist to crush the terrified student before he could cast his fireball. Farron scrambled away, overwhelmed by the sheer pressure the monster exuded. Acting quickly, Farron launched a massive fireball directly into the orc's face. Using body-strengthening magic, he grabbed Emilia and her companion, urging them to escape. Mid-air, Farron activated a gravitational release spell, allowing them to float safely above the ground. The orc glared up at them as Emilia recognized the spell as Owen's flight magic. Farron struggled to gain speed, weighed down by the extra passengers. Down below, the orc grabbed a large log, preparing to hurl it at them. Realizing he couldn't dodge or cast offensive spells while maintaining flight, Farron pleaded with the girls to intercept the attack. As the orc hurled the massive log, the girls retaliated with a blade of wind and a spear of light. The spells struck the beast head-on, but only served to enrage it further. Emilia realized the paralysis was a specific skill of the High Orc. They crashed hard into the dirt, dislocating Farron's shoulder. Knowing he couldn't fight in his condition, he told the girls to run, but his companion immediately offered to heal him. Farron insisted that getting the teachers was their only hope of survival and volunteered to hold the monster back. Reluctantly agreeing, Emilia pleaded with him not to die as she and the other girl prepared to flee. Farron launched another massive fireball, surprised by the colossal creature's agility as it dodged the blast. Bored with the stalling, the hidden figure decided to send some company after the fleeing girls. Meanwhile, Farron narrowly dodged the orc's devastating strikes, realizing that playing defensively would eventually get him killed. Farron knew weak magic was useless and considered using a stronger spell like Ifrit. The orc suddenly found itself boxed in by a circle of fallen logs. Farron unleashed the powerful Ifrit spell, engulfing the trapped orc in a towering inferno, hoping the flames would at least keep the monster contained for a while. As Farron desperately hoped for the teachers to arrive, Emilia and her companion neared the safe area. Suddenly, they found their path blocked by a pack of vicious goblins. As a goblin was swiftly dispatched by a sharp blade of wind, Emilia and Farron paused to catch their breath. Emilia urged them to hurry and find the teachers for Owen's sake, noting that the thinning miasma meant they were close to safety. However, Farron suddenly stopped in her tracks, a look of hesitation crossing her face. Turning around with a resolute expression, Farron firmly declared that she was going back to where they had left Owen, leaving Emilia completely bewildered. Emilia frantically argued that it was far too dangerous, but Farron insisted that Owen would do the same for her. Without another word, the Saintess dashed back into the dense forest. Emilia desperately called after her, begging her to at least inform the teachers, completely baffled by the reckless decision. Sprinting through the undergrowth, Farron berated herself for running away in the first place. She reminded herself of her duty to put others' lives before her own, resolving to use her holy power to do what was right. Emerging into the clearing, Farron spotted the massive High Orc taking a wild swing at Owen. Realizing the beast hadn't noticed her yet, she quickly gathered her holy magic, hoping to suppress the demon's miasma and knock it out with a concentrated spear of light. She unleashed the blinding projectile directly at the monster's face, but to her absolute horror, the attack didn't affect it at all. The High Orc slowly turned its terrifying gaze toward her, immediately activating a physical enhancement skill as it prepared to charge. Ignoring its previous target, the enraged beast swatted Owen aside like a ragdoll and barreled straight toward the defenseless Saintess. Owen slammed brutally into a thick tree trunk with a sickening crunch, prompting Farron to scream his name in panic. Seeing him severely injured and realizing he would die if the monster continued its assault, she bravely stepped forward and fired another light spear to draw the orc's attention back to herself. Slumped against the tree and bleeding heavily, Owen weakly questioned why Farron had returned just to get herself killed. As the monster focused entirely on the Saintess, Owen realized this was his only opening. Forcing his trembling hand to aim, he prepared a devastating strike that was normally too unwieldy to hit a moving target. With a desperate shout, Owen unleashed a high-powered piercing bullet. The concentrated blast of magic tore through the air and struck the High Orc squarely in the back of its thick neck, causing the beast to let out a deafening groan of pain. The massive creature finally collapsed forward, hitting the ground with a heavy thud. Exhausted and battered, Owen let out a breath of disbelief, realizing he had actually managed to take it down. Farron immediately rushed to his side, calling out his name in relief as he tiredly acknowledged her presence. Kneeling beside the wounded boy, Foran asked about Emilia's safety. Owen assured her that he had sent Emilia ahead, prompting the saintess to begin casting her holy healing magic over his battered body. As the warm light enveloped him, Owen looked at her in disbelief, asking why she would risk her own life to come back for him. Owen guiltily admitted that his own reckless behavior had nearly got her killed. However, Foran calmly rejected his apology, explaining that as a servant of the Holy Church, she could never abandon someone in need, even if it meant sacrificing her own life. Frustrated by her lack of self-preservation, Owen scolded her for being so willing to throw her life away. Staring at her unwavering expression, Owen couldn't help but feel that her extreme selflessness was genuinely dangerous. High above in the canopy, the cloaked figure watched the exchange with amusement, impressed by the rare display of holy magic and sinisterly plotting to crush the girl later. Suddenly, the hidden observer dropped a small, mysterious pouch from the branches, which landed softly near the two students. Before Owen or Foran could react to the strange object, a terrifying shadow loomed over them as the high orc, still very much alive, slowly rose back to its feet. Owen stared in sheer terror, realizing his strongest attack hadn't been enough to finish the monster. Desperately shielding Foran with his injured body, he cursed his inability to continue fighting. Just as the enraged beast let out a blood-curdling roar, a sharp voice suddenly commanded the creature to freeze. In an instant, a massive glacier erupted from the ground, completely encasing the high orc in solid ice. Chris Sensei strode into the clearing, calmly apologizing for her delayed arrival as Owen cried out her name in overwhelming relief. High in the trees, the cloaked figure clicked their tongue in annoyance, frustrated that their accomplices had failed to delay the powerful instructor. Muttering a promise to meet Owen again, the figure vanished seamlessly into the wind. Down below, Chris Sensei scanned the perimeter while a tearful Emilia finally caught up to her friends, asking if they were okay. The adrenaline finally leaving his system, Owen stared blankly ahead, struggling to process that he had actually survived the ordeal. As he began to slump backward in exhaustion, Emilia suddenly tackled him into a tight, tearful embrace, loudly sobbing out his name in relief. Realizing her mistake, Emilia quickly backed off and apologized for her rough handling. Foran gently chided her, explaining that Owen had sustained severe injuries that were barely stabilized. Relieved that everyone was safe, Emilia praised Owen for defeating such a high-level monster. Awkwardly rubbing his neck, Owen admitted that he hadn't actually beaten the orc and had nearly died. However, he genuinely thanked Emilia for bringing the teachers just in time, ensuring nobody lost their lives. As Owen humbly accepted the praise, a familiar, arrogant voice suddenly cut through the clearing. With a condescending smirk, Dominic berated Owen as a coward and a fool for recklessly challenging an enemy far beyond his capabilities and nearly getting himself killed in the process. Furious at the hypocrisy, Owen angrily shot back that Dominic had been the first one to run away from the monster. He defended his own retreat, arguing that anyone who couldn't recognize the sheer power of the high orc was the true failure. As he passionately justified his tactical decision to flee, he suddenly noticed that everyone in the clearing was staring at him in stunned silence. Breaking the awkward silence, Squad Sensei placed a heavy hand on Dominic's shoulder and surprisingly agreed with the boy's harsh assessment. The older instructor calmly stated that weaklings were indeed better off running away from battles they couldn't win. Feeling vindicated, Dominic immediately gloated to Owen, leaving the battered boy utterly confused by the teacher's blunt remark. Squad Sensei continued, praising Owen for being strong enough to hold the line so others could escape, while pointedly criticizing Dominic for trying to justify his cowardly retreat. Dominic gritted his teeth in frustration, humiliated by the stark comparison. Chris Sensei quickly reprimanded her colleague for his harsh phrasing, prompting a mild apology from the man. Despite the apology, Owen bitterly realized the instructor's assessment of his own weakness was entirely accurate. Reflecting on the disastrous encounter, Owen acknowledged that he had made the wrong choices and that his lack of foresight had nearly gotten them all killed. Remembering his desperate, ineffective attacks against the beast, a wave of profound inadequacy washed over him. Clenching his fists, he cursed his own weakness, angrily blaming himself for the entire humiliating situation. Tears of frustration pricking his eyes, Owen glared at the ground with newfound resolve. Driven by the painful sting of defeat, he silently vowed to himself that he would do whatever